Hello, can everyone hear me okay? No, okay. Now can you hear me? No? Okay, now can you hear me? The good thing is they gave me something that I can move around because I get really antsy. Yes, my name is DeeAnne Zuhlke, and I'm glad I was able to present after lunchtime because now your bellies are full, hopefully you're relaxed and everyone's ready to talk about grief and aging, right? Because that's exciting. It is for me though, because grief is extremely hard work. And oftentimes it's one of those topics that people kind of back away from, and yet we all experience those things. So as we're going through the presentation, think about maybe for yourself, this could be for the people that you're around, our neighbors, our family, and then the ones that you're caring for. Real quickly, I was going to leave this at the end, but I have two books that I think can be really helpful for people. We have this at the center, and I usually hand them out when they're like, I've just lost somebody, what would be helpful? I love this book. I don't get paid for this. This isn't an endorsement. It's just a really helpful book for you. It's a smaller read, so I'm going to pass that around so that you can write it down or you can look through it. And then this one here is Expecting Loss, Coping with Anticipatory Grief. So I'm going to pass those around real quick. Can I hand this to you? Yes. Okay, so again, I work at the Grief Center. So all day long, I deal with people who have experienced a loss, and I love this job. I think it's very rewarding, and I love being here, and I love having the opportunity to talk about it. Our mission is not only offering grief support to the community, but it's also educating the community on grief's impact. Grief is hard work. Would anyone agree with me on that? Yes, it is hard work. And it's something that a lot of us will experience. So when we're looking at aging, aging can be hard work, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, aging can be difficult. So we're going to be going through quite a few slides to kind of talk about that. And at the end, if there's an opportunity for us to talk, I would love it, because that's really what I like to do, is involve the audience so that we can get that support and connection and how their experiences are. So coping strategies and support. I just want to say that grief and aging refers to the unique experiences of coping with loss, bereavement, as individuals grow older. It's something that we experience. And addressing grief in aging individuals involves recognizing the complex interplays between our emotions, our physical, and our social health. So let's see if I can get this to go. Green is forward. So grief happens to almost everyone. And grief is a natural response to a loss that could include a loss of a loved one, our health, independence, and our roles that we play. Now, I want you to think about a time. How old were you when you first remembered grieving? And how did your family react to the loss? Was it an open discussion? I hear laughing. Was it an open discussion about the loss? Were you able to share memories and emotions? Were you allowed to express your grief? Were some of those feelings ignored? Did you feel stuck? And was it hard to seek meaning? Now, what I hear working with people who are grieving, and they're grieving the loss now, they'll say, when I was younger, I remember experiencing, maybe it was a loss of a grandparent or a parent. And back then, we didn't talk about it. After the funeral, it was over, it was done. We just moved on. And I see heads nodding. But as we're aging, and as society is getting better about talking about some of these harder topics, we're realizing how important it is for us to find meaning in the loss, that we need to talk about the loss and share those memories. And so how is it now that you are older and wiser? A little bit different? So common types of grief, because when we think about grief, sometimes we just think about loss. And yes, a death is definitely grief, but we could be experiencing our friends, our siblings, our pets, our furry pets, our friends, our companions can be so hard when we've lost one of them. And oftentimes they're the ones who get us through the grief. So when we lose our pets, it can be extremely difficult. Retirement. Is retirement as fantastic as we thought it was going to be? For some, they say yes, it might be. But for others, it's a little bit challenging. We're so used to having our daily routines and our purpose, and we knew our mission, and we were just going with it. And then after retirement, it's like, oh, now I got to decide what I want to do. And that can be challenging. It can be exciting, but it can also be challenging too. And then declining health, usually with grief, declining health comes into play. And then changes in our living arrangements, especially if we lose a spouse and a house that we've lived in for 30 years. Now we have to move into a smaller home or maybe an assisted living or move in with our families. That can be difficult. Losses due to aging. I want you to look through this one. Is there anyone that sticks out to you? You can just shout it out. Oh, you're eating, that's why you can't. Driving. Yes, driving is huge. If you remember the first time you got your driver's license, it was amazing. I don't think there's a birthday that's ever as exciting as when we can finally drive. It just opens the door to freedom. Our parents say, hey, well, you don't have that much freedom, settle down. But driving, so when we lose our ability to drive, that can be very devastating and it can be depressing. And I don't think we give it enough credit. We don't talk about it. It's just something that happens in our life. But it's important to recognize these things because they start to kind of compound and add up. So driving and then dignity. Dignity can be a really hard one as well, especially when we can't do some of the things that we usually can do on our own. And when we have to ask for help, and asking for help can be super difficult. Is it easy to ask for help? No, it's not. It's hard, especially when we are independent. And we'll be talking about that as the slides go through. So different types of losses due to aging. Symptoms of grief. We have emotional reactions, shock, anger, disbelief, guilt. There can be some guilt in there, sadness, physical pain, difficulty sleeping, eating, or thinking clearly. So maybe our eating habits have changed, maybe our sleeping habits have changed, whether we're eating too much or we don't have an appetite, whether it's hard to sleep or all we want to do is sleep. So paying attention to some of those things. And if you're feeling some of these things and you're like, oh yeah, maybe I do need to reach out and talk, getting support is so important. And this is what we're doing here. We're supporting each other. We're learning, we're doing psychoeducation. How can I help me and how can I help my person that I'm caring for? And is there any relief from this? Well, I hope so, because otherwise we'd be walking around going, oh my gosh, this is so hard. And sometimes we are, but there is relief. Talking really quick about how grief manifests. For older adults, it may experience grief differently. We have accumulated loss, physical health issues, and social isolation. When we look at, there we go, accumulated loss, older adults may experiencing multiple losses. Now I'm going to use my mom as an example. For her, she had 3 of her siblings and one of her best friends die within 5 years. So when we're talking about those accumulated losses, it happens, especially as we grow older. I wish there was like a rule where you can only lose somebody every 10 years. You know, let us heal from that, then we can move on, and then, you know, whatever. But that's not how it works. And as we age, that becomes very difficult because it seems to happen more often to our neighbors, to our family, to our friends. Now, for her, losing her friend was really tough because that was her person that she talked to every day. Even if it was just a 5 or 10 minutes, it was that check-in. Now, one of the receptionist volunteers that work at the center in Greeley told me, you know, what's so hard about losing a friend is that you can't make a best friend when you're my age. It's hard to just make a best friend. So acknowledging that these losses are hard is really important. And to talk about it and find support through it. I always say we're packed animals. We thrive better when we're together. So when we have an opportunity to share our experiences, to talk about those memories, it can be so helpful, hopeful, and healing. I get to experience it all year long when I run grief groups. They're usually about 8 to 10 people. And even though it's so hard and it can be like, oh, I'm going through this, I can barely deal with this, let alone sit there and listen to 7 other people talk about the loss. But what usually happens is that they go, oh yeah, me too. And I thought I was alone. You know, I thought I was the only one feeling that or experiencing that. But when we have an opportunity to share, it really does help us connect, it does offer support. So reaching out, seeking that support is really important. And then recognize that accumulated losses. We experience more loss as we age than we did when we were in our 20s and 30s. Our physical health, it could be chronic illness, pain, progressive disease, our motor functions. That is definitely involved in grief, and that can make it very difficult too when we're grieving and also causing social isolation. That's a tough one, especially if we can't drive anymore. Our circle that was huge before, where we had all of this freedom, slowly starts to get a little bit smaller, especially as we lose our people around us. It gets a little bit smaller. And when we have physical ailments, that can be difficult as well. So aging well, what does it mean? And I want you to read those. Aging isn't for the weak-hearted or the weak-minded. Yes. You grow old and you quit versus when you quit, you grow old. Is there truth in that? Okay, I hear a yes. And then the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purposes of life is to give it away. I love that. But that can also be challenging. And that kind of comes in when we go into retirement, looking for, okay, where is my new meaning in life? When our families, they get older, the kids get older, our grandkids get older, sometimes it's like, oh, that's what I lived for, is taking care of my family. So now it's time for me to find things that I like to do, and that can be tough, but it's important. And one of the groups that we recently did, a gentleman said, people still need our love. And I loved that. I was like, ooh, I'm still in that one. That one's good. But people still need our love. Even though it might seem a little bit quieter, that's so important to remember. Aging well, a sense of purpose, finding that sense of purpose. In retirement, again, it can be difficult looking for different goals or interests. What do I want to do? What can I do? Do I want to take up guitaring? I don't know. Maybe I want to play the guitar. Maybe I want to play the piano. Maybe I want to volunteer. Volunteering is very helpful. Adapting to life changes. And I have this one highlighted because I think it's huge. Those expectations that we have. Again, I'm going to use my mother as an example. I hear her say, oh, DeeAnne, I get so tired. I used to be able to clean the house and get everything done and still have the rest of the day. And now I can barely clean a room. I have to sit down, I have to clean another room. And sometimes I can only get through 1 or 2 rooms. And I said, but you're still getting through 1 or 2 rooms. And she goes, yeah, but just a couple of years ago, I was able to do more. And I said, yeah, but that was a couple of years ago. And so trying to have that mindset, and it's not easy to say, it's not that I can't clean my house anymore. It's that it might take me a little bit longer. And so giving yourself grace and space And if there's one thing that you take away from this presentation, I hope that it's, I need to give myself some grace and space because this is very difficult work. And there is a lot. I mean, I have like 20 slides, but we could go through the whole day just talking about the difficulties with grief. But those expectations that we have can be very challenging. So trying to reframe that mindset, and then acceptance and gratitude, finding joy in everyday moments. I wrote a paper when I was getting my bachelor's, and I was doing it on positive psychology. I wanted to do positive psychology. And then here I am in grief. A little bit different, but I see the connection and I love it. But it said for every negative experience that we have, we need to have 3 positive ones just to balance it out. Because those negative experiences, man, we hold on to those. And so think of that, even if it's little, and it doesn't have to be big. It can be just small little things. And sometimes we need those small little achievements in the day. Around 3:30 every afternoon, there is 3 dark chocolate walnuts that I have in my office. That's one of my happy moments. It's balancing some of that negative stuff. So it can be as simple as something like that, but really trying to have our mindset be more focusing on when we can do than what we can't do. And I'm not up here saying it's easy. It is difficult work, but we need to work for it. And when we can share some of those things, it can be very helpful. Coping strategies for grief and aging, advocating for yourself. Is that easy to advocate for ourselves? No. What works for you? It could be maintaining a routine and structure, engaging in self-care, acknowledging and validating our feelings, and fostering meaning making. So maintaining a routine and structure. This is really important, whether it's for you or for the person that you're caregiving for. And I think COVID did a really good job showing us how difficult and how important it is to keep a routine. I worked from home. I wasn't at the center at the time, but I worked from home. And there was days where I'm like, do I put on pants or do I just leave my pajamas? And then I'm like, did I remember to brush my teeth or should I do it now? I mean, you know, the routine, because we were out of our routine, and it really does make a difference. And so people that we're caring for, that can be hard because their routine changes. My mom is recently going through chemo. And so I know that her days and her routine looks a little bit different. So giving herself grace and space and giving myself grace and space, but trying to keep her on that routine will be really helpful for her and for me. So maintaining that routine and structure. Would you guys agree with that? Was it difficult during COVID with the different changes and not having to get up, go to work right away? Otherwise, we could just hop on the computer. It was different. It was hard. Acknowledging and validating those feelings, encouraging older adults to express those emotions. And like I said, I hope we have some time to talk, and I know you're going to be doing breakout rooms. And so having that opportunity to talk even within the tables and share some of the difficulties that we're going through, I hope will be very supportive for you. So being able to talk about our feelings and our emotions, and then engaging in self-care. Self-care is hard because oftentimes for many people, when they think of self-care, they think it's selfish, and it's not. Sometimes it feels selfish. Now, just finishing up my master's, which I'm graduating next week. So this is my next big thing. I'm like, once I have this done, I'm sailing through the summer. But engaging in self-care, that's hard when we have so many things that we need to do. But taking that time, whether it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes, waking up early, going to bed a little bit later, just to have some time for that self-care can be really important. And self-care looks different for everyone. Remember, mine is those 3 dark chocolate walnuts that I have in my desk. So engaging in self-care, fostering meaning and making, and that can be difficult as well, but something worth looking at. So encouraging older adults to find meaning and purpose in their loss through activities such as journaling, And some people love journaling and other people are like, oh, but it's amazing that when we put out, whether it's talking or writing our feelings, it can be helpful. And it's almost like our brain is going, oh, okay, now I don't have to keep telling you because you remember, you're going to remember, you put it out, you told somebody. So journaling, and when you're journaling, it is not writing for your English teacher. So you don't even make complete sentences. You can just journal however you want and write however you want, but journaling can be extremely helpful in volunteering. So we have 10 receptionists that volunteer every week for the center, and it's so wonderful. They do 2.5 hours, and they say it's a reason to get up for the week and get dressed and go out, and they find so much meaning in being able to answer the phones and help out, and they're lovely. I appreciate them so much. So finding different opportunities to volunteer. Also, when you're caregivers, you're doing a lot. I don't think you have to worry about volunteering right now, but volunteering can be very, very rewarding. And then allowing memories to be shared. So I live next to my parents. Literally, I live right next to them. Like I could have a slide and go right into their yard. And I have 2 boys. My girls are older. And my son, who is just turned 19, will go over and visit with my mom. She kind of gets anxiety at night. So he'll go over there and either watch basketball, or he'll say, tell me how it was when you were younger. And she'll just sit there for an hour or 2 hours and talk about what it was like when she was younger. And I'm grateful that he wants to hear and he wants to know, but having those opportunities are really important too. So allowing people to help, and there's a slide on this because that can be really difficult, but being able to share those memories, looking through photo albums, going through, and sometimes tears are shed when we do that. And I don't want you to hesitate because we don't want to make our people sad. It's on our minds, and oftentimes we want to, and those tears can be hard, but they're also very healing. So just being in that space, and when people are crying, we're fixers. Caregivers don't do it because they don't care. They're not people helpers. We want to fix people when we see them struggling. But sometimes the best thing we can do is just sit in that space with them and allow them to have that and allow them to express it without having to worry about trying to fix it, because there's some things that we just can't fix. But again, it's allowing them to have that voice and be heard. So sharing memories, and then support systems for our grieving older adults, whether it's family and friends, community services, healthcare providers, and faith-based organizations. So family and friends, encouraging the family to come over. If there's grandkids, if there's cousins, we feel bad sometimes asking people, but having them come over and talk to our people who we're caregiving for, or for us, can be really helpful. And then when someone asks, how can I help? Let them. So if you don't like journaling, at least write a list. Look at your schedule. You know what? Thursdays seem to be my busiest days. I have doctor appointments, I have this, I have that. So when someone says, let me know if there's anything I can do for you, say, actually, on Thursdays, I'm so busy. Would you mind bringing something for dinner? Would you mind making something? Would you mind come and sitting with my person? Because for us, it is huge. When someone can do that, it's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. But for the person who is offering, they're not in it as you are. They're not doing this all day long, every day. And so it helps them feel like they are contributing. And so allowing people to help, because beautiful things can happen. Right now, it's my dad, my daughter, and myself who are caregiving for my mom. And one of the cousins came over and she said, oh, I would like to take your mom to chemo. And I was like, I felt like this should be something that we need to do. And then I thought about it. She wanted to. And so I told my daughter, no, let her do this. Let her have that time. And so that can be hard, but I think it's important for us to allow, when people want to reach out and help, have a list, because otherwise we'll say, oh, okay, we won't ever reach out to them. So when they're reaching out to us, give them something that they can help with, even if it is just coming. Can you just come and sit with my person for 2 hours? and all you do is go to the park and sit in your car, that's self-care, and that's so good, and you deserve that support. So allowing yourself to have some of that time and grace can be very helpful when we are going through grief and aging. And then our healthcare providers, talking to our healthcare providers, listening to our people, asking if there's any support out there. I'm hoping that they know of other areas that might be helpful for you, but we don't know unless we ask. And so they might know somebody who knows this, and that's how we get connected. That's why these groups are so important, because you might be struggling with something and you share it and someone goes, oh, I know this great resource for you. And it's like, oh, thank you so much. Because if you get on the website, you can look and you can Google things, but then you'll have a list of all of these different, and you're like, where do I even begin? So it can be overwhelming. So being able to put that voice and ask our healthcare providers what's available and what does support look like for you. And sometimes you just have to say, what do I need? And that's really tough. If I were to ask you, what do you need right now? Is there anybody who would know right offhand what they need? Maybe. It can be tough because we really don't ask ourselves that question. What do I need? What can be helpful? But think about that. Think about that this week. Do you want to share? Yeah. Yeah.
I ask oftentimes, I'm the one that's late a lot. So I ask for help picking up my loved one and getting him where he might need to be. Usually it's a social event.
Yeah.
And then I take him home. So
yes.
But I'm real specific, and it's usually I ask somebody that's close by.
Right. And I bet they appreciate being able to do that. They really do. And for you, it's like so huge.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, oh, thank you so much. One, because now I don't have to worry about getting them there late, but also it gives you that little break, and then you can go and do that. So yeah, like, what do I need? What would that look like? So kind of having a list and start working on that list can be very helpful and supportive. Thank you for sharing. And then faith-based organizations, that might not be for everybody, but there's a lot of organizations out there and church support groups that can be helpful as well. So faith-based organizations, with COVID, one of the great things that did come out is we're able to do Zoom. So we can do this presentation not only in person, but with whoever else is out there. And the same thing for churches. A lot of times you have to go to church, you can still log in and be able to hear the sermon. So faith-based organizations can be helpful, but just finding things that your person might get support, or something that might be supportive to you. And then seeking that support. Again, it can be difficult to reach out, but you're here. So you are seeking that support because you're like, tell me how I can do this better. I wish I had a magic wand or a list that I'm like, follow these things and you'll be good. Everything will be fine. But it's not like that, because each one of you that are sitting here today has a unique and different experience. And so that makes it difficult. But the thing of it is there are similarities as we're going through things. So that can be helpful. Counseling can be helpful. Community services, bereavement connections for older adults. They have online resources. You don't always have to go in person. Support groups, and then healthcare services. And then for caregivers, and I have that book going around. I'm not sure where it's at right now. Oh, good. Okay. That is a really helpful book. It's a shorter read because we know when we're busy, it can be difficult to just spend time and have an hour or two to read a book. So it's short reads, but that can offer a lot of support. Anticipated grief is for loss that is to come. And it can be difficult because no matter how hard we try and prepare ourselves, we never know just how it will be once our person is gone. And so being able to kind of start having those conversations, looking at what do I need to support myself, can be helpful. And then the conclusion, give yourself grace and space, take what you need, Life's journey looks different for everyone. So please, as you're leaving today and as we've been able to share, that you continue to give yourself safe and grace and the people that are around you. I think we still have time, so we can open up. Does anyone have anything that they want to share about what some of the slides had on there? Were there any experiences that you could relate with? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Oh, we do have so many things. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. So I found the anticipatory grief being, I'm very happy that you brought that up, because I think that as you go through the process and you're caring for someone and you're seeing the changes and you're saying that part of mom or whoever
Yeah.
is gone now, and there's grief there,
Oh, yeah.
and learning how to deal with that and putting that aside when they're still here and recognizing, okay, this is the new now,
Mhm.
and appreciating and having the gratitude of who is there now. And it's
Mhm.
different.
Yes.
And another thing I was thinking of as you were talking about that is there's also post grief.
Yeah.
So
Mhm. Yeah.
there is no time limit on grief.
No, there's not.
And I think we need to honor and
Mhm.
allow ourselves the space. I love that, grace and space.
Yes.
It comes like in, it's kind
Waves.
of like, yes, thank you,
Yeah.
waves. It comes
And it's
in
called
waves.
a grief burst.
And
It'll just come out of nowhere
nowhere.
and knock you down. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it doesn't necessarily end in the so it's 10 years.
Mhm.
That's a long time.
Yeah. No, but I'm glad it's 10 years, and I'm glad that you're still able to express how difficult it can be.
Yes.
Mhm.
And the thing that I've been working on, because it does come in waves, and when it does hit out of the blue, just even talking about grief,
Yeah.
and then yet where I go after that wave of emotion, and I feel that intensity, but then I reflect on all the gifts
Mhm.
that I have had. And I did that in the anticipatory grief,
Mhm.
and I'm doing it in the post grief,
Yeah.
because it's just the stages. And I think this is one thing that, and everyone does it differently. And when you can just
Right.
be there for someone and you can just allow them the space to share a few things, God, that reminds me of when, and then all of a sudden you're laughing about this great story,
Mhm.
and then you're just filled with that appreciation. I am so glad I had those moments.
Yeah.
So I don't have any comments other than just to the statement, give yourself grace and space, and it's before, it's during, and it's after.
Yes. I was working with a person who had lost their spouse, and he was a caregiver. And so he came in and I said, how are you doing today? And he's like, I took a shower. I was like, good, you took a shower. He's like, but I was able to just sit there and take a shower. And how significant that was for him, because he said, DeeAnne, there's days where I didn't take a shower for like 3 days because I was so exhausted and tired. And so like those simple things can mean so much. And so being in that, and I love that you said there is no time limit, because society sucks when it comes to giving us, 3 months, and somehow we're supposed to magically be over the grief. And the thing of it is when we have a close person, for others, they might continue to go on and after 3 months, but when it was somebody very close to us, we are very much still in that grief. I always say the first 2 years are one of the hardest But when you're losing somebody and you say, oh, it's about 2 years, they're going, oh, I can't do this for 2 years. It changes over those 2 years, but it's still very much present. And it's hard because you are still there, but it feels like society has moved on. And sometimes you just want to shout, like, stop, I'm grieving. I just lost my person. And we move a little bit slower and it feels a little bit different. And sometimes it can feel more heightened, like things just, we're more sensitive. I always in my mind think of it as like an octopus with little feelers. You know, music seems louder, traffic seems busier, our mind, that fogginess. And with anticipatory grief, when we're caregiving, sometimes that happens earlier than after the grief, but the fogginess, we feel like we're losing our mind. We even have a class that calls You're Not Going Crazy, because simple basic things can be difficult. We can be driving and then be like, where was I going? I can't even remember where I was going. You know, it's like, oh yes. One of the ladies in our support group said, instead of babies on board, there should be a sign on our car that says grievers on board, because it can be hard to concentrate. We've been driving for, you know, our whole lives, but it can be hard to concentrate. So being able to share some of those things, and I love that, because it often feels very isolating, especially as the world kind of continues and we feel still very much present in the grief. Yeah, but no, it's not something to get over. Yeah, and those grief bursts. And what can be hard about the grief burst is that when you are healing and as you're going through that, and I always say, healing doesn't mean forgetting, because sometimes there's fear that as we heal, we're going to forget our person. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, but that it takes time. And we need to give ourselves grace and space for that. Yeah. And that's hard to do sometimes.
It's easier when you've got
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah.
And then they go, okay, you have
Yeah.
a minute, that's okay.
And they'll let you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you get right back on track.
Yeah. Just sitting with you sometimes is all we need. If you've ever had a bad day and you have that one person that you can call and they're not trying to fix you, they're not saying, well, DeeAnne, you know, you need to lose weight, you need to go to the gym. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't helpful. But when I call my person and they're just listening to me and I'm just like, you know, word vomiting all this stuff. And then I'm like, okay, I gotta go. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, thank you so much. And they're like, I didn't even do anything. And it's like, you did. You just let me vent. You just listened and you didn't try and fix it. And there's some magic in that as well when we have that opportunity. But when the grief burst comes, what can be hard too is that as we're healing, when that burst comes, we're like, oh no, because I mean, it's intense. It can feel like it was, you know, just yesterday. And it can be scary because we were thinking we were progressing. And what happens is usually with the grief burst is it doesn't last as long. So it might not be as frequent or as long. And then you feel better, you know, giving yourself those times. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Oh, yes.
You've addressed grieving when you lose somebody, but I find that I'm grieving and angry at the same time, okay, over what we have lost and what we will lose, or we no longer have that option. And I'll give, for instance, my husband was an avid skier, backpacker, no longer. Not only that, that took away a lot of our social circle.
Yeah.
Okay. As well as we're never going to be able to experience what we wanted to be doing in our retirement, backpacking and traveling and such.
Yeah.
So the relationship between the anger and the grief is so much there sometimes.
Yeah.
And then if we do talk to somebody from that group, and they start talking about,
different.
do you remember when
Yeah.
we went down, you know,
Yes.
goals and so on? We're like, well, yeah, we do remember that, but we can't experience that like you're telling me that you did yesterday.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it's a very hard balance for us.
Yes. And just to kind of summarize, because I think our time is up, to say that when we're experiencing grief, anger is in there. And finding ways to express that anger, but anger, they're valid. And there's no way to move. Some people experience anger, some people never do. But saying like, this is hard and I am angry about it, but finding ways to release some of that and going through it. I wish I could take that away for you. Yeah,
It's okay.
but you know, you can't. But being able to just say like, yes, yeah, like this is hard. So thank you so much for giving me this time. Oh, we do. Okay, I thought I was, okay. Yeah.
So real quickly, I don't know if everybody else noticed at the very beginning of the presentation about grieving affects most people. And that's what I caught. And to make sure I told my wife, I said, did I see it right? Because
Mhm.
grieving affects everyone. It's all a universal, use that word, universal situation.
Universal.
Everyone goes through it, whether young, middle, or old. We all go through grieving.
Yeah.
So that's why I was hesitating.
To
I
say-
think I saw that up there in the slides.
You did. Very, yep. mhm.
Okay. That's what
Almost
I'm saying.
everyone and they experience it in different ways. But yeah, it's one of those things that we will go through. Mhm.
I lost my dad when I was 11, and I remember the guilt feeling when I realized I was outside playing with my cousins, and you know, you stop and you say, but my dad died.
Mhm.
I shouldn't be playing. But I think we go through the same thing when we lose an adult, as an adult, and we realize that my loved one died. The traffic is still going on. Nobody's paying attention outside. Don't they know? But I think
Yeah,
there's
don't they
something
know?
about
Yeah.
getting over the guilt feeling
Mhm.
when you walk out of it for a moment and you're not grieving. It's still okay.
Mhm. Yeah, guilt is a hard one. Guilt, anger.
I have taken a lot of classes in grief and things through my career. I was surprised that nothing was mentioned about the different stages of grieving. And this was so ingrained in my career
Mhm.
and with my dealings with my patients and my husband right now.
Yeah.
But I'm really surprised at that. And so many people that I have talked with that are grieving right now through loss, whatever it is, they don't realize that they have to go through each of these phases before they can get to acceptance. It might take them years, but you know, they have to know that that's normal.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't realize that that's normal
Mhm.
to experience these things.
Yep.
And I have talked to at least 6 people here recently that are going through and they're stuck in different phases. But that's okay
Yeah.
because we all experience that. But a lot of people don't realize.
and
And you didn't bring that up.
because I don't like using the stages of grief. When it comes to stages, if I do talk about stages, I'll talk about like phases, because sometimes when we're looking at the stages of grief, we think, okay, we checked it off, we got through the denial, now we're in the anger. There's some people who don't experience anger. There's some people who right to the acceptance. There's some people who can go back to the anger. So the phases of grief can be very fluid, you know, so that's kind of where I step away from the stages. And oftentimes we think, okay, I'm done with this, next on to the next one. If only that's how it worked. I mean, it would be really helpful. But are different levels. Talking about anger, absolutely. That is one of the phases as we're going through grief. Will everyone experience it? No, but some people. I don't want to say everyone or most people, everyone is different. So that's why I stay away from the stages of grief and use kind of, yeah, yeah,
It's so interesting how I see from years and years and years.
Yes.
My portrait, how our thought process has all changed.
changing.
And it used to be fixated.
Yes.
So on those stages, but now what you're saying makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'll think of it differently.
Oh,
Thank you.
good. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
I don't know if this is a question or guidance or suggestion. So kind of loud. But I think one thing, like to that point about everyone experiences grief, is understanding and validating that everyone, like there's a person who received the Parkinson's diagnosis who is experiencing their grief. And then there's the direct spouse, often the taker, who's experiencing, and the extended family who's experiencing their grief, and making sure, I did not mean to cry, that you take care of, like understanding that I want to validate the person who's experiencing their direct grief, but I'm also grieving. And you know that the caretaker is also grieving. And so and you don't all just like every conversation is not just negative, but it's kind of how do you balance that every person's room experiencing some different, whether it's a phase or type of grief, and just naming that everybody's going through that. And I don't know if it's a question of like, how do you validate grief, also experience grief, without it becoming this cycle, that's all you're doing.
Yes, and that can be tough because like you said, a family of 5 can lose the same person, but each person is going to have a different reaction to the loss because of the relationship that we had. That's why it makes it really difficult, because there's some people who are like, I'm not ready to process this grief. Right now, I'm pushing this away and I'll deal with it later. And they'll stuff it in their backpack. And others are like, but I need to talk about this. This is really hard for me. And so it can be difficult trying to balance those things out. If you are somebody who says, it's helpful for me to talk about it, I need to talk about this to somebody who understands, looking for support groups. And I wish like everyone could be on the same playing field in a family, but it's just not like that. So it's difficult, it's messy. So looking for what they need. And sometimes it's like, what do you need? What would be helpful for you? And just listening to them. And then, if there's something that they can do, or expressing like right now, what I need this. And and allowing yourself to get that. I just need to go for a drive. I just need to go wherever that looks like. But there really is no easy way with that, because it is so difficult. And, a loss, whether they're still here or whether they're gone, brings up so many different mixed emotions, and at different times. Because like maybe I'm having a pretty good day today, and I'm looking and I'm like, I don't want to like say anything to the next person because we don't want to upset them, or maybe they look like they're having a good day but we're having a hard day. So trying to balance that out it's a dance.
Can I just say something real quick? So in the stages of grief, one of them is acceptance, and not everybody has to accept Parkinson's. Okay, so you're resenting the disease. You're not resenting the person. So remember that it's not your partner. It's not your child. It's not that who has Parkinson's. It's the Parkinson's is what you're resenting. So try not to take it personally and don't blame it on them. It's the disease. And I say condition. I don't like to say disease. So just remember that. It's important that it's the condition. It's not the actual person.
Okay, we have like 5 minutes left here.
I just find that it's not a sequential thing. It's not, okay, I'm feeling angry right now and I'm feeling acceptance and gratitude right now. They can exist all at the same time. I can appreciate that my husband's still able to do a lot of things, and I can be really grieving the future and all the travel that we were going to do, and so many things, the deepening and the exploring and the adventures, and still just being furious and overwhelmed and upset and all at once.
All at once. Yes. Any other questions? Thank you.